I used to believe that family meant forever, that no matter what happened, blood would protect you. But I was wrong, because when life took everything from me, the house, my husband, my peace, it wasn't strangers who finished the job. It was my own daughter. And the man she married. They thought they broke me. They thought they could erase me quietly. But they didn't know. Sometimes, the people you throw away come back stronger than you ever imagined. My name is Margaret Louise. I'm 58 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything I loved and found something even more powerful. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and before we start, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a reckoning. For most of my life, I believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to my family. My husband, Robert, and our daughter, Amanda. They were my world. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every dime I saved, it was all for them. When Robert passed away from cancer last year, the world went quiet. It's strange how someone's absence can fill a room, even louder than their presence ever did. Still, I told myself, at least I had Amanda. At least I wasn't alone. After the funeral, I sold the house Robert and I built together in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories there. Too many nights I woke up expecting to hear his voice from the kitchen. Amanda said I could stay with her for a while. Well, Amanda said it. Chad, her husband, just nodded and went back to his phone. I moved into their guest room. I tried not to be a burden. I cleaned up after myself, cooked dinner, ran small errands. I wanted to be useful, to feel like I still belonged somewhere. But Chad made that impossible. He had this way of looking at me, like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. It started small. He'd roll his eyes if I asked a question, change the TV channel mid. Once, I heard him mutter freeloader under his breath. As he passed me in the hallway, I pretended I didn't hear it, but I did. Amanda said nothing. Whenever I looked to her, she just brushed it off. He's stressed, she'd say. Work's been rough. So I swallowed the shame and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, right? We keep peace, even when our hearts are breaking. But that one night, that dinner, it changed everything. I had made chicken pot pie, Chad's favorite. Amanda scrolled on her phone. Chad sipped his beer, and silence filled the room like smoke. Then, out of nowhere, Chad looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary." I froze. He leaned back, smirking. "We're not a charity. You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills, Margaret." He said my name like it was a bad word. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed. I looked at Amanda, pleading silently, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake." For everyone's sake. That line still echoes. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I stood up, walked to my room, and packed my things. 2 suitcases. That was all I had left of 58 years of life. I didn't cry while I packed. The tears came later. When I stood outside their apartment building, with the wind cutting through my coat, and realized I had nowhere to go. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't say a word. I sat on the curb for almost an hour. My phone battery was dead. My heart was too. And I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. That night, I checked into a cheap motel, the kind where the wallpaper peels, and the vending machine outside steals your change every time. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could turn so cold so fast. The next morning, I texted Amanda. I understand. I love you always. No reply. A week later, another message. Then another. Birthdays. Little updates. Silence. 3 months passed. Each day stretched longer than the one before. I tried to find work. Any work. But nobody wanted a grieving widow. In her late 50s, with no recent experience, I even thought about cleaning houses, babysitting. But my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness was suffocating. But the shame was worse. I had given everything to that girl. How could she turn her back so easily? One evening, while going through an old box of keepsakes, trying to feel close to something, anything, I found it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe ever. But something about that night, something about the silence, made me open it. I sat on the edge of the bed, turned the first few pages. Her handwriting was still the same, neat, careful. The same loops she used when she wrote me lunchbox notes as a child. At first, it was simple stuff. Grocery prices, church, the weather, but then I reached the entry that changed everything. June. He came again today, she wrote. Said he wished things were different, that he wished I could be his wife, but he has a family, a business, a name to protect. Margaret will never know. She must never know. My breath caught in my chest. I kept reading. Page after page. Hints, memories, hotel meetings, small cash payments she tried to refuse. She never wrote his full name, only initials, HJ. And then, one entry, dated February. He said he's made arrangements, that if anything ever happens to him, he'll make sure Margaret has something. A part of what he built. It won't be official, it's too dangerous. But he promised me a trust, a letter. He said his lawyer, Mr. Goldstein, would know what that means. Goldstein? The name hit me, like a punch to the chest. I'd seen it before, somewhere. It took me 2 days, and a dozen searches, on the motel's shared computer. But I found him. Leonard Goldstein, retired estate lawyer, Dallas. I didn't call. I couldn't. My hands were trembling too hard. So instead, I wrote a letter, a real one. Ink on paper. I told him who I was, who my mother was, and begged for a conversation. 2 weeks later, the phone rang. I always wondered if you'd reach out someday, he said. There's something you need to see. The next morning, I took a Greyhound bus to Dallas. Half my suitcase was empty, just in case this turned out to be a cruel joke. But when I stepped into his quiet office, lined with old books, an older silence, I knew this was real. He handed me a yellowed envelope, sealed and fragile. From Harold James Sterling, the founder of Sterling Energy, one of the biggest oil firms in Texas. A man whose photo had been in newspapers my entire life. A man with a wife, a family, a legacy. The letter was addressed to my daughter, Margaret Louise. I couldn't finish it the first time. I broke down halfway through. He confessed everything. The affair, the regret, the love he couldn't show, and the promise he made. In the event of my death, he wrote, I have ensured that a portion of my personal assets, untraceable through my estate, be delivered to you through Mr. Goldstein. You are my blood. And though I was too much a coward to claim you in life, I claim you now in death. Mr. Goldstein slid a folder across the desk. Inside, bank accounts, a small investment portfolio, ownership papers, titles. The total, a little over $1 million. I stared at the papers, then looked at him. This is real, I whispered. He nodded. It's yours. Always was. My heart didn't race because of the money. It raced because for the first time in my life, I felt chosen, seen. I didn't scream. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, quiet as a whisper, and let the truth wash over me, like long-awaited rain. That night, back in the motel room, I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, the same way I had for months. Only this time, a smile crept across my face. They thought they discarded me, but they had no idea. They hadn't buried me. They had planted me, and I was just beginning to rise. They thought I was finished. They thought I'd crawl away quietly, lick my wounds, and fade into the background. But they had no idea. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. When you've been humiliated, when people strip you down to nothing, what's left is something stronger than they can handle. I didn't rush back to Austin. Something inside me had shifted permanently. I wasn't just Margaret, the pitied widow, the discarded mother. I was someone new. Someone who had been lied to her entire life, and finally saw the truth. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in shame. I was breathing clarity. I stayed in Dallas for a few days longer, just walking through neighborhoods, sipping coffee at corner cafes, watching strangers live ordinary lives. People who hadn't been tossed aside like I had. And for the first time, I didn't envy them. I studied them. I wondered, who among them wore smiles to hide heartbreak? Who had clawed their way back from being invisible? Leonard Goldstein didn't just hand me an inheritance. He handed me time. Time to think. Time to understand what I was holding. It wasn't just money. It was power. And power, in the right hands, isn't loud. It's patient. Grief turns into fuel when you've been humiliated long enough. So when I finally went back to Austin, I didn't return to that sad little motel. I booked a short-term rental downtown, just off South Congress. Clean, modern, quiet. The kind of place Amanda and Chad could never imagine me affording. I began dressing differently. Polished, deliberate, not flashy. Just invisible in a new way. The kind of invisible that opens doors. Instead of closing them, I spent nights watching YouTube videos about investing, real estate, contracts. I wasn't looking to build an empire. I was learning how to never be powerless again. And then, I found it. A listing buried deep on a real estate auction site. A small apartment complex in East Austin. A little worn down, but structurally solid. The address stopped me cold. It was their building. Amanda and Chad's building. The same one they'd thrown me out of. With 2 suitcases and a hollow excuse, I stared at the screen, heart pounding so loud, I could hear it in my ears. The property was listed as distressed. Owner defaulting on taxes. Auction in 2 weeks. I didn't hesitate. With Mr. Goldstein's help, I created an LLC, a quiet, untraceable shell company. Filed the paperwork. Transferred the funds. Placed the bid. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. I was reclaiming control of the one place they thought they ruled. The auction came and went. No fanfare. No drama. And just like that, I owned the building. The same building where they humiliated me, where I stood in the cold, with my life packed in 2 bags. I sat at my new desk, staring at the deed, and whispered to myself, let's see how Chad likes paying rent. To the mouth he couldn't feed. A month later, notification letters went out to all tenants. New ownership, rents reassessed, leases reviewed. For most, the increases were small, reasonable. For Chad and Amanda, triple, not double, triple, market rate, plus overdue fees, plus interest. He must have exploded. I didn't have to see it, to know it. I could feel the rage from miles away. But this wasn't about money. It was about pride. Chad needed to feel in control, and I had just pulled that rug out silently. Without a sound. 2 days after the notice, Amanda called me. First time since the night I left. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, I don't know if you heard, but something weird's going on. Our rent just shot up like a lot. Chad's losing it. I don't know. Can we talk? I didn't reply. This wasn't vengeance. This was gravity. They were finally feeling the weight of their choices. One night, I drove by the building. Their lights were on, curtains half drawn. I could see shadows moving inside. Amanda pacing, Chad yelling, his silhouette sharp and angry. I sat there for a minute, watching from my car. Part of me felt hollow. Part of me felt vindicated. And part of me still hurt like hell. Because even now, after everything, I would have given anything to be invited back in. Not to the apartment, but to my daughter's heart. But I knew that wasn't possible. Not yet. So I stayed silent, and I waited. Because sometimes, the loudest justice is the one that doesn't make a sound. 3 weeks later, I saw Amanda again. By accident. At the grocery store. She didn't see me. I was 2 aisles over, hidden behind a rack of discounted cereal. She looked tired, not just tired. Worn out. Her hair was tied back sloppily. The way she used to, when she'd been crying. Her cart was half empty. Cheap staples, rice, eggs, off-brand cans. I should have walked away. I didn't. I followed her quietly, heart pounding, like I was doing something wrong. She stopped in front of a small box of mac and cheese, picked it up, looked down at her phone, then set it back on the shelf. That tiny motion broke me. Not because I pitied her, but because I remembered the little girl who used to run to me crying after scraping her knee. The child who begged me to check for monsters under her bed. And now, she was living with one. That night, I sat in silence for hours, just staring at the window, thinking about how life had twisted us into strangers. But I reminded myself, this wasn't punishment. This was consequence. And consequence was long overdue. I had plans now. Not loud ones. Careful ones, like chess. Every move calculated. Every step deliberate. With the LLC fully in place, and the deed under my control, I started small. Minor repairs. Leaky faucets. Broken locks. Flickering lights. Chad didn't notice. He was too busy. Ranting about the rent increase. Sending angry emails. To the property manager. Threats. Demands. Bluster. But I knew him. I knew his pride. Wouldn't let him move. Leaving would mean defeat. And Amanda. She always followed his lead. So I kept going. New signage. Security cameras in the lobby. Updated mailboxes. All branded under ML Holdings. Short for Margaret Louise. No one knew who was behind it. Then came the next notice. Annual inspections. Mandatory. Chad's response arrived the same afternoon. A furious email, filled with half-baked legal threats and righteous indignation. I smiled reading it. He was unraveling, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Meanwhile, I was becoming someone I barely recognized. My hair, once loose and soft, was now pulled into a sleek bun. My clothes, structured, confident. I joined small business meets under a pseudonym. No one asked about my past. They saw a quiet, composed woman with sharp eyes and cash on hand. The best disguise is the truth you never tell. One morning, I passed Amanda and Chad in the parking lot. After a tenant meeting, I kept my sunglasses on, documents in hand. Amanda glanced my way, but didn't recognize me. Chad walked right past me, talking on his phone, oblivious. Later that night, I sat in my living room, sipping tea. thinking about how strange it is to walk past your own child and be invisible, not because you're weak, but because you're stronger. Then they remember. They couldn't see me now because they only knew the version of me they could control. And that woman, she was gone. The calls from Amanda continued. Soft, hesitant voicemails. Hi, Mom. Just wanted to see if maybe you had time to talk. I know things have been complicated. I didn't return them. Not out of cruelty, but because she needed to feel the void she created. And every time doubt crept in, I opened my mother's diary. Those words still echoed. Margaret will never know. She must never know. But I did know. And that truth had become my armor. I wasn't the woman begging to stay under their roof. I was the woman who owned it. I've always believed revenge isn't about getting even. It's about balance, about correction, about quiet justice. But when I read the email Chad sent after the rent notice, I'll admit, a small flicker of satisfaction lit inside me. Subject, rent increase. This is absolutely unacceptable. This must be a mistake. Tripling our rent. That's extortion. I smiled, because finally, the man who once called me a burden was paying for the roof over his own head, and he didn't even know whose name was on the deed. I demand to speak to whoever owns this dump. We've lived here 3 years and never missed a single payment. This is robbery. That was Chad's email. Bold, aggressive. Signed off like he was somebody important. Chad D. Harmon. As if his name carried weight in the world. I read it 3 times, smiled faintly, and forwarded it to my property manager with one simple note. Please respond using Clause C regarding market rate adjustments. No special exceptions. That was all it took. See, Chad wasn't just angry, he was shocked. The kind of stunned that only happens when a man realizes he's lost control. He'd built his life on being the one holding all the strings, and now, suddenly, he was the one tangled in them. That same night, my phone buzzed again. Amanda. Her voicemail sounded different this time. No cheerful front, no practiced calm. Mom, I know you're not answering, but things are bad. Chad's upset. He's taking it out on everything. I miss you. I do. Her voice cracked at the end. For a moment, my thumb hovered over the screen. I could have called her back, told her everything would be okay. But it wouldn't have been the truth. Because it wasn't okay. And it hadn't been for a long time. Amanda stood by and watched him throw me out like I was an old piece of furniture. A bill they didn't want to pay anymore. And now that her own walls were crumbling, she suddenly remembered how to dial my number. No. Let her sit with the silence for a while. The following week, I approved new upgrades for the property. Fresh paint. New hallway lights. Landscaping. Here's the irony. Chad's rent hike, the thing that sent him spiraling, was literally funding improvements for everyone else. Every other tenant benefited. He just couldn't see it. That man started slipping angry notes under the office door. Water pressure sucks. Trash piling up. If this is what we're paying for, it's a joke. Each one went unanswered. Amanda stopped leaving voicemails. She started texting instead. Short, hesitant messages. Hey, can we talk? I really need you. And then, silence. Meanwhile, the business was thriving. ML Holdings was profitable, organized, quiet. Every tenant paid on time, except the one who used to believe he ruled the place. Then the quarterly report came in. Attached were photos of their unit. Bathroom mold. Cracked kitchen tiles. Unopened mail piling by the door. They were cutting corners, living small, breaking down piece by piece. I should have felt sorry for them. But pity didn't come. Clarity did. This wasn't about rent anymore. It was about power. And Chad, the man who once strutted like a king, was running out of it fast. Word around the building was he'd picked up extra shifts at work. Amanda had been seen crying on the back steps one afternoon. They were unraveling, and I didn't have to lift a single finger. That was the part that hit hardest, the silence. For years, I'd begged Amanda to listen, to see Chad for what he was. Now, the silence they'd given me was closing in on them instead. My new apartment had a clear view of their courtyard. Different building. Higher floor. Safer neighborhood. Better everything. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see them through the lit windows, arguing, pacing, shadows moving across the walls. And I'd sit by my window with a cup of tea, just watching quietly. Not out of cruelty. Just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. That what they did to me had happened. And that consequences, real ones, don't need an audience. Still, there were nights when I'd stare at my phone, reading Amanda's last text. I really need you. And my chest would ache. The mother in me wanted to run to her. But the woman I'd become, the one forged through betrayal and silence, she knew better. She knew this was only the beginning. Heartbreak isn't always loud. It doesn't always slam doors or throw plates. Sometimes it just sits there quiet, in a voicemail you don't return, in a message left unread, in the space between a mother and a daughter who once couldn't go a day without talking. The calls stopped. Then the texts. But I started hearing whispers from the property manager. The tension in their apartment had boiled into open fights. Chad had turned paranoid, snappy, controlling, impossible to please. Amanda looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, walking around like a ghost. One afternoon, I got a report after a noise complaint. A tenant downstairs heard shouting, Chad yelling, something about losing control and this is all your fault. Then a door slammed. Chad didn't come home that night. Amanda stayed inside, curtains closed, lights off. I waited. Not for him, for her. 2 long days passed. Then, just as the sun was sinking below the trees, my intercom buzzed. Hi, this is Amanda Harmon. I was wondering if my mom lives here. My heart stopped. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, frozen. Then, slowly, I pressed the door release. 10 minutes later, there was a soft knock. When I opened the door, there she was, Amanda, but not the daughter I remembered. This one looked worn thin, her makeup smudged, her shirt wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked 20 years older than her age. We stood there for a long moment, neither of us speaking. Finally, she exhaled. Hi, Mom. I stepped aside. She walked in carefully, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. The only sound in the room was the quiet clink of teacups as I poured us both a drink. I didn't ask why she was there. Didn't ask how she was. I just sat across from her and waited. She stared down at her hands. I don't know where to start, she whispered. I stayed silent. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke again. Chad's not easy. He's angry all the time. Blames the rent. Her eyes glistened, and for a brief second I saw her again. The little girl who once ran to me crying after a scraped knee. And I realized I'd been right to wait. Sometimes, love isn't rescuing someone from their choices. Sometimes, it's letting them find the door and hoping they finally walk through it. He blamed me. He blamed the rent. He even blamed the poor dog next door. Everything was someone else's fault, never his. I sat across from Amanda as she whispered it. Her voice was trembling, like she was afraid the air itself might shatter. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said. Back then, when we asked you to leave, asked as if I'd had a choice. She looked down, twisting the edge of her sleeve. I just wanted peace. Chad said you'd never move out unless we made you. And her voice cracked. I hate myself for agreeing. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I'd learned that sometimes silence is safer than truth. She kept talking, trying to explain the unexplainable, and all I did was sip my tea and listen. I miss you, she whispered finally, but I don't know how to fix it. Her eyes searched mine. desperate for forgiveness, terrified of rejection. I didn't give her either. Just a quiet nod. And the kind of silence that tells you someone's still deciding if they can trust you again. We sat like that for nearly an hour. She didn't ask for help, or money, or pity. She just wanted to be near me, and I let her. When she finally stood to leave, she reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said softly, "for everything." I didn't say it back, but I held her hand a little longer than she expected. She pulled away first, and when the door clicked shut behind her, I sat there holding her teacup like it was the only warm thing left in the world. She had come back. She had looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I knew the cracks were finally starting to show. The thing about power, real power, is that you never have to raise your voice to use it. You don't slam doors or send threats. You just pull one quiet string and watch the people who underestimated you start to sweat. And Chad, he was sweating. After Amanda's visit, something dark settled in that apartment. I didn't need cameras to feel it. You can sense when a home starts to rot from the inside. The maintenance team told me he'd become unhinged, storming into the management office twice a week, demanding to know who owned the building. He wanted a name, a face, someone to blame. The fact that he didn't have one, that drove him mad, and I knew he'd start digging. Control freaks always do. He'd done it to Amanda, too. Checking her phone when she took too long at the store, asking for receipts, timing her errands. So when he started sniffing around ML Holdings, I was ready. He began with the LLC, standard procedure for the curious and the desperate, but my lawyer had buried every trace behind a privacy trust. No names, no breadcrumbs. Then came the sloppy tricks. Fake tenant emails, asking who the owner was, clumsy, transparent. He even called the title office, pretending to be a lawyer from another property, but the clerk knew better. Flagged it immediately. When the digging got him nowhere, he turned inward. And that's when things got ugly. A neighbor called management one night. Worried. Said she heard glass shattering, raised voices, and Amanda crying. The maintenance guy went up to check. No one answered, but through the door, he could hear Chad pacing, muttering. And then, silence. The kind that leaves a chill behind. A few days later, I got an envelope. No name, no return address. Inside a note. I know what you're doing. You think you're clever. But you don't scare me. I'll find out who you are, and when I do, you'll regret it. No signature. But I didn't need one. Chad wrote the way he lived. Angry, uneven, pressing too hard on everything. I sat with that letter in my hands. Heart thudding, not with fear, but with memory. It took me straight back to that kitchen. The night he looked me dead in the eye. Like I was, something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. And Amanda, standing beside him. Not just silent, complicit. And now, here he was, screaming into the void, grasping at shadows. It was poetic. But it was also dangerous. So I doubled down. I called my lawyer, had security upgraded, discreetly, legally, quietly. I wasn't going to let one man's unraveling endanger everyone else. The other tenants deserved peace. Chad's chaos would not become their problem. Meanwhile, Amanda faded into whispers. She didn't call again. But word trickled through the staff. She was walking to work. Her car sold. Utilities cut back. Lights out early. No heat on some nights. The cracks weren't just in their marriage anymore. They were in their survival. And still, I stayed silent, because this was never about revenge. It was about resolution. Letting Chad's world shrink. Until he finally realized how small he really was. And letting Amanda decide, would she stay in that cage? Or finally use the key I'd left right in front of her. I didn't expect the knock that night. The week had been still. Too still. No calls. No letters. No threats. Just the kind of silence that feels like thunder waiting to roll. Then, a knock. Soft, reluctant. I opened the door. Amanda stood there, soaked to the bone, a grocery bag clutched to her chest like armor. Her eyes were red. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I stepped aside. She came in, dripping rain on the floorboards. I handed her a towel. Neither of us spoke. The kettle hissed softly as I made tea. Chamomile, same as before. She sat at the edge of the couch, hands wrapped around the mug like she was holding on for dear life. Finally, she spoke. "He's not who I thought he was." I said nothing. She continued, voice shaking. "I mean, I knew part of me always knew. But I kept telling myself it was just stress. That he just needed time. That if I was patient, he'd get better." Still, I didn't answer. Some confessions don't need encouragement. Then she said it. "He thinks someone's targeting us. He's obsessed." She looked up at me, fear swimming in her eyes. "He's been going through my phone. My emails. Last week, he followed me to work." Her fingers trembled. "He said he was making sure I wasn't hiding something. That you weren't hiding something." That caught my breath. "I told him I hadn't spoken to you in weeks," she whispered. "That I didn't even know where you were." She paused. "But that was a lie." Our eyes met. "I found your building listed in a security notice," she said. "Same management company." I put it together. It wasn't hard. Of course it wasn't. Amanda had always been sharp. Just not always brave. Now, she looked like a woman who had finally opened her eyes and hated what she saw. "I miss you," she whispered, "but I don't even know how to be around you anymore." My grip tightened around the mug. "You left," she said suddenly, her voice cracking, "and I let him push you out." Finally, I spoke. "No, Amanda. You didn't let him. You stood with him." That stopped her cold. She blinked, opened her mouth, but no excuses came out. I stood, walked to the window. The night was quiet. Almost too quiet. "I begged for your voice that night," I said. "Just one word. One sound. Anything." Behind me, I heard her exhale. A small, broken noise. "I didn't think it would get this bad," she said. "I thought I could manage him." "You can't manage a man like that," I said softly. "You survive him. Or you leave him." She didn't answer. Didn't need to. We sat in silence again. Two women bound by blood. Separated by choice. When she finally stood to go, she placed the mug down carefully. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "I just needed to remember what it felt like. To be safe." I walked her to the door. She paused, then turned and hugged me. I didn't return it at first. Then I did, cautiously. Like holding a memory you're afraid might dissolve if you grip too tight. When she let go, she didn't say goodbye, just looked at me, then left. And as the door clicked shut, I felt something stir inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe. The beginning of it. The invitation went out that Tuesday morning. Formal, professional, simple. A mandatory tenant meeting regarding upcoming renovations. Attendance required. Questions welcome. I knew Chad would come. He wouldn't be able to resist. He needed a name, a face, someone to corner, and I was ready to give him one. The day of the meeting, I arrived early. Charcoal blazer, dark jeans, steady hands. After all, he had spent years trying to unmask the woman who owned his world, and now he was about to meet her face to face. You know that feeling when you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back. That's where I was that morning. Simply elegant, unrecognizably. My hair, once dry and brittle from stress, now fell in soft waves brushing my shoulders. My posture was straight, steady the posture of someone who no longer asked for permission to exist. I looked nothing like the woman who once begged for a sliver of dignity at Amanda's kitchen table. The community room began to fill up. People trickled in, some curious, some irritated, most indifferent. The smell of stale coffee and paper handouts filled the air. And then he came in. Chad, storming in with that same arrogant stride, the kind of walk that says, "This room belongs to me." Amanda trailed behind him, her eyes darting nervously toward the floor. He didn't even glance my way. To him, I was invisible. He went straight to the property manager at the front. "Where is she?" he demanded. "I want to speak to whoever's in charge here." The manager stayed calm, professional. "All questions will be addressed during the presentation." Chad scoffed, muttering under his breath. Amanda shrank behind him. I sat near the back, quiet, collected, waiting. The meeting began. Routine announcements, upgrades, renovations, security improvements, new insulation, landscaping, better lighting. Everything funded, in part, by the rent that Chad had spent months protesting. Then the manager paused. "Before we continue," he said, "we'd like to thank M Holdings for their generous commitment to revitalizing this property. The owner is with us today should anyone wish to ask questions." And that's when I stood up. The room turned to look. Slowly, I walked toward the front, each step measured, steady, echoing against the tile. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Chad's face twisted first in confusion, then disbelief. Amanda froze. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak but couldn't. "Good evening," I said, my voice calm. "My name is Margaret. I'm the owner of this building." Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Then Chad shot up from his seat, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. This is a joke." "What kind of game is this?" I looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see power. I saw panic. The sweat behind his collar. The puffiness under his eyes. The way his hands trembled just slightly. "No game," I said softly. "Just business." He took a step toward me, his voice shaking with rage. "You manipulated this. You've been behind it the whole time. You raised our rent. You're trying to ruin us." I held my ground. "I gave you a roof. I made improvements. I treated every tenant equally. What I didn't do," I paused, "was forget." He opened his mouth to speak again, but I turned to the room instead. "If anyone has questions about the renovations or policies, I'll be happy to answer after the meeting. Thank you." Then I stepped aside. The presentation continued, though no one was really listening. The air in that room was electric, tense. Chad didn't sit. He just stood there, seething, lost, humiliated. Amanda kept her head down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When it ended, tenants came up to shake my hand. Some smiled, some thanked me quietly. A few said they'd suspected something, most hadn't. And then, when the room emptied, Chad approached. "You think you've won," he hissed. This is nothing. You've made an enemy." I met his eyes, steady. "No, Chad," I said. "I didn't make anything. You did. The day you looked me in the eye and treated me like I didn't matter." Amanda stepped between us. "Chad, stop." He blinked at her, stunned. "What did you just—" I said stop. She snapped. "She's not your enemy. She never was. You are." He stared at her, like she'd just betrayed him. In truth, she'd finally found her voice. Amanda turned to me, her voice shaking. "I didn't know about any of it. The building, the money, your connection to Sterling. I swear." I nodded. "I know." "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because you had to see it," I said. "Not just hear it." Her eyes filled with tears. Chad scoffed and took a step back. "You two deserve each other." "No," I said quietly. "She deserves better." Then I walked away. And for the first time since that night in their kitchen, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt powerful quietly, completely powerful. 4 days later, Amanda showed up at my door. This time, she wasn't angry. She wasn't defensive. She was holding something in her hands. Something that made my knees buckle the second I saw it. A book. Faded leather, edges torn, spine barely holding together. My mother's diary. I found it in my closet, she said softly. The last time I visited you, you must have left it behind. She placed it on my coffee table like it was something sacred, and for me, it was. I read it, she whispered. My heart stopped. I wasn't trying to pry, she continued quickly, but I recognized her handwriting. I was looking for something that made sense. Silence settled between us, thick and heavy. I didn't know about Harold Sterling, she said finally. Or the money. Or the trust. Or any of it. I nodded slowly. I didn't either. Not until I had nothing left to lose. Mom, she said, voice breaking. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe you were helpless? I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time, she didn't look away. Because I was, I said. The night you closed the door on me, I had no plan, no money, nowhere to go. I didn't even have a place to cry where someone wouldn't tell me to keep it down. Amanda winced, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I found that diary when I was at my lowest, I continued. When I was counting coins to buy dinner. When I hadn't spoken to another soul in a week. That diary didn't just tell me who I was. It reminded me why I mattered. That my mother didn't just love me, she fought for me. Quietly, without ever being able to show it. Amanda sat down, her hands clenched in her lap. I don't know how I became the kind of daughter who could do what I did, she whispered. I keep asking myself that. I walked to the window, staring out at the street below, life moving on. Indifferent and steady. You didn't become her all at once, I said. It was small choices. Letting things slide. Choosing peace over truth. Thinking love meant silence. She came closer, her voice trembling. I've left him. Those 3 words hung in the air like a thunderclap. She swallowed hard. He tried to go through my things again, my laptop, my bag. I told him no. He screamed, packed up, and left. Said he'd be back. I changed the locks the next day. I turned to her, stunned. I don't know who I am without him, she said softly. But I'd rather find out than keep disappearing. A silence fell, not the kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. She looked down at the diary again. You didn't deserve what I did, she whispered. What we did. I can't fix it. But I want to try. I sat down beside her. I used to dream about hearing those words, I said. But now that I have, they don't fix the past. They rewrite it. She frowned, confused. You see me now, I said gently. That changes everything. We sat there together for a long time, breathing in the kind of silence that doesn't sting. Before Amanda left, she paused at the door. You didn't raise me to be weak, she said. I just forgot how strong you were. I smiled. No, I said. You didn't forget. You just stopped looking. And now, she finally saw me. When the email came from Chad, I almost didn't open it. The subject line made my stomach twist. We need to talk. Now. His words were frantic, unhinged. He knew everything, the inheritance, the trust, my connection to Sterling. He threatened to go to the press. To expose me. To ruin my name, my mother's legacy. Everything. But what he didn't know was that I had been ready for this moment since the day I bought the building. I forwarded the email to my attorney. By the next morning, Chad had a cease and desist letter sitting in his inbox. Inside were records of every threatening message he'd ever sent. The fake documents he tried to file. The tampered maintenance reports traced straight back to his IP address. There were tenant complaints, audio clips, witness statements. He was cornered and he knew it. Amanda called me 2 days later. He's gone, she said. Packed up while I was at work, left a note saying he was being hunted. Said you ruined his life. He ruined his own, I said quietly. She was silent for a long time before whispering, I'm sorry again. For everything. You were scared, I told her. And I understand that. Fear makes us small, but we don't have to stay that way. After that, Chad tried a few desperate online rants, vague posts, half-truths, but he never named me. He couldn't afford to. The second letter from my attorney made sure of that. And then, just like that silence, Chad was gone. Amanda, though she was changing. She moved into her own place, started therapy, joined a community art class. She even painted something for me, a phoenix rising from deep red and gold. I hung it above my fireplace. We talked more now, not daily, but often. Honestly, no pretending. The last piece of my story arrived in a cream-colored envelope. A letter from Mr. Goldstein. Congratulations, Margaret, it read. The building has been officially transferred. The lawsuit against Mr. Harmon is resolved in your favor. You are now free to sell, hold, or restructure as you wish. I folded it carefully, held it to my chest. This wasn't about property or money. This was about reclaiming my name, my truth, my strength. The next morning, I called a realtor. A few weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday in late spring, I signed the papers. No champagne. No celebration. Just a firm handshake and a long exhale. The kind you take when you finally let go of the weight you've carried for years. Half of the money went to a women's shelter. A safe place for those standing where I once stood, lost, terrified, with nowhere to go. I asked them to name a wing after my mother. The Eleanor House. The rest I used to buy a small home. 2 bedrooms. White shutters, a porch swing under an old oak. Amanda helped me move in. We unpacked boxes, made grilled cheese sandwiches, laughed when one burned. It felt normal, beautifully, impossibly normal. That night, when she left, I stood by the window, a cup of tea in my hands. Moonlight washing over everything, and for the first time in years, I said it out loud. I forgive you. Not to Amanda, to myself, because that's the hardest part of healing, realizing that forgiveness isn't surrender, it's freedom. I wasn't the fire they tried to extinguish. I was the spark they never saw coming. They tried to erase me, but I became someone they could never forget. And as I sat there, the clock ticking softly behind me, I knew I was finally home. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts or your own story in the comments below. Because every voice, especially the quiet ones, deserves to be heard.